Hello, Minister. Thank you so much for making time to sit with me.
Thank you so much for having me.
The year is nearly coming to an end. This is December, and obviously there's a number of projections that you've made as government in terms of what you want to do for the people. How do you feel as government you've fared so far?
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. I would like to say that 2024 has been a very challenging year for us in government and for all our citizens and the entire SADC region, owing to the drought that has ravaged the SADC region. And in the case of Zambia, we are facing an unprecedented severity of drought, the worst in living memory. So this has presented challenges on many fronts of our life as a people, ranging from electricity generation, water provision and scarcity thereof for humans, livestock and wildlife, food deficit situation itself in terms of maize, and because of this situation, you find that there has been a downgrade in terms of economic activity in the nation. As you know, that the economy is powered by energy, by power, and so with electricity deficits, a lot of businesses have been affected, particularly small-scale businesses, those that do not have capacity for alternative energy sources in crisis moments such as this one. And that is why government quickly had to put in some interventional measures, which included purchase of huge capacity generators to distribute to markets, so that those who are involved in businesses such as restaurant, saloon, barbershop, metal fabrication can still go on with their business activities and hold on to a gainful livelihood. So that has really been the legacy of 2024, which has come on the backdrop of the cholera situation that we had experienced the year before. And also connected to it was COVID. So it was COVID, cholera, and now drought. So that is what has really defined government's interaction with its citizens, and negatively affecting some of the projections that government had put in place. But I'm happy to indicate here that even in the midst of all these challenges, government has risen to the occasion to ensure that the basic minimums have been met, to ensure that the livelihoods of our people have been safeguarded. And in terms of the continental issue, number 78 of the Afro Barometer, Zambia, this particular year, has ranked the best performing country on the continent in terms of uplifting the livelihoods of its people. That is an indication, therefore, that notwithstanding the challenges in our midst, the government is putting the right policies and governmental interventions in place. Well, interventions such as free education, which is meant to give our young people an opportunity to access life's best inheritance, an education, and in this particular regard, particularly for the girl child, to give them an opportunity to finish school so that you take them away from the dangers of early marriages. The international community has noted that intervention to have a long-lasting impression on the livelihoods of our people. The government has also gone ahead to introduce in this particular year emergency social cash transfer alongside the traditional social cash transfer, and also interventions such as cash for work to ensure that citizens will do work for 10 days in a month of 30 days or 31 and get paid as though they had worked for a month. in that particular regard. And the whole idea of cash for work really is to promote a culture of hard work while empowering citizens to access resources to at least buy food. The initial conceptualization of cash for work was supposed to have been just relief cash handouts, but it was envisaged that if we go that way, it might end up being attract abuse. So let's put work first, so that only those who are interested to work can enlist. And in the process, you've seen that towns are becoming cleaner and cleaner. So we have killed two birds with one stone. So those are interventions that the government has been able to put in place. And you've also seen that in terms of government operations, I think that the government has been on point in terms of disbursements of grants to governmental institutions, particularly our learning institutions, something which is so unprecedented, and it's making work easier for our teachers and administrators of institutions. Government has also gone ahead to take over the responsibility of paying tuition fees for our exam writing candidates. These relief measures in a disaster struck year are very, very important, because begin to imagine a widow who is looking after orphans. Maybe 2 or 3 or 4 of them are school going. And if government had not put such intervention measures in place, this particular widow, a mother or a family, would have the nightmare of having to think of where to find school fees to pay for their children, exam fees to pay for their children.
I was about to ask, Minister, how effective you think these interventions are. Because to some, like you rightly mentioned, that this is a worst drought in living memory. The effects that have come with this drought are equally the worst in living memory. I'll give you an example of the energy crisis. Some areas in this country have been going for a week without having electricity. Businesses have shut down. Entrepreneurs, have had their businesses closed because of load shedding. You speak of some of the interventions that government has put in, such as the buying of generators. I'd like to find out, how this intervention has helped businesses remain afloat. And I'd also like to find out the number of generators that your government has bought to this effect.
Well, thank you very much. 2 questions there. Firstly, to what effect are these, measures? I would like to indicate firstly that when you talk about the electricity sector, as a people and as governments, we have not previously invested sufficiently in alternative sources of energy, even when it was known that climate change was going to affect rain patterns. But I think this is something which is not just blamable to Zambian governments, but the entire region and maybe the whole continent, at large. And also to say that perhaps the challenges of climate change have come earlier than reasonably anticipated. So the real problem here is that is not climate change itself. It is that even when we knew that climate change was coming with negative effects or consequences, we did not put adaptation and the resilience measures in time, particularly now talking about the energy sector. And talking about the new Dawn administration, you will realize that when President HH came into office in August 2021, in terms of responding to the energy crisis in the nation, we found that Sino Hydro was constructing Kafia Gorge Lower of 5 generators to produce 750 plus 12 megawatts of power. And only 1 generator was paid for and firing. And within under about 1 year turnaround time, government found the resources to pay Sino Hydro. And as of November 2022, government, and through President HH, had commissioned the entire 5 generators. Secondly, government through ZESCO was owing Mamba collieries, who produce 300 megawatts of thermal power, about 590 million US dollars. Government put ZESCO on schedule and on course to begin to pay Mamba collieries. And as we speak, government has mobilized resources working with the private sector for the construction to which the president commissioned phase 2 of Mamba collieries thermal power plant to produce another 300 megawatts of power. Now, these 2 projects alone will show you that the already existing installed electricity generation capacity that we have as a country is beyond national requirement in terms of demand if we have no more rains. So that is where we were getting it wrong as a country. We're prioritizing the focus on our capacity to generate more than we require as a nation in terms of hydropower. We should have had into anticipation that in times of drought, all that machinery we have installed would be of no use or little use, as the case is presently. So we are invested adequately in terms of alternative power generation. This in terms of short-term, long-term, medium-term, and long-term interventional measures. I can tell you the short-term measures that the government put in place. One is to encourage a shift by those with capacity to move away from reliance on electricity, hydroelectricity, to alternative sources such as gas, such as solar. And I think that quite a number of citizens have since moved on, and many, and I want to present myself as one of those who have moved into solar. We've discovered that actually it's cheaper than the ZESCO that we have been paying. So that again is a gain that we want to encourage, a mindset shift that in fact when you go solar you make a saving. So that is one of the things that government has tried to promote, a mindset shift. Additionally, government has to buttress that.
And just on that note, many have condemned you to be an unrealistic government that lives in a bubble, because just to install the solar at your house, Minister, doesn't cost anything less than 10,000. How do you expect a family in Chivolia that lives below the poverty line to have an installation of solar at their house?
And exactly the point that I've made, and if you got me clearly, I said government encourage those with capacity. And the idea of encouraging those with capacity to switch from hydro electricity to solar is to free some hydro electricity, free it off to those who can't afford, like the examples you are giving. Instead of all of us clamoring to share the little power which we are generating by means of hydropower, those who are able come out so that what is remaining can now be reasonably shared amongst the communities that may not afford solar. So that is something we think that as government is progressive, and to ensure that that is encouraged, the government has amended the law or rules to do with power generation and distribution in the country by coming up with an open access system, where now if you are going to produce more power than you need, as an entity, as an individual, as a business, you can sell off to the national grid and realize money. This is how in certain jurisdictions people live. those countries that don't even have rivers to produce hydroelectricity power now are power sufficient because citizens generate power and sell off those who have excess. The second thing, before I lose my mind, is that what government has done is to bring online Ndola Energy, which had shut down because they didn't have the primary, ingredients to produce power. They are producing 105 megawatts of power, which is diesel generated. Now, that power is expensive. It cannot be afforded by ordinary citizens. So what government has done was to negotiate with Ndola Energy and also the mines to come up with a price mix arrangement, where now that energy is solely supplied to the mines, who are able to buy it at that expensive rate, so that 105 megawatts that the mines are now buying, they have freed some power which they should have been consuming, which is affordable from ZESCO. So that, we believe, was a step in the right direction. And of course now phase 2 of Mamba Collieries, which is expected to come on board within 18 months of construction. Already they've been constructing for some 2 months or so. So within the next 16 months, we expect that 300 megawatts to come on board. And also, the government is encouraging big conglomerates out there, the mines. We recently visited First Quantum, mines. They want to put up their own power consumption, their own power, grids, so that they will not rely on ZESCO power to power, their energy requirements in the mine, but that they will produce their own and produce a surplus to be able to feed into the national grid in order to respond to this particular challenge.
That was a bill that was presented before Parliament.
When was that?
That was about 4 months ago, when a bill was presented, compelling mind, that was presented by Honorable Kangombe, but the bill was shut down.
But let me just clarify. We didn't shoot down. When a motion has not gone through on the floor of the House, it doesn't mean that it has been shut down. If a motion is asking governments on the floor of Parliament to do what government is already doing, in the debates, we indicate that you are pushing an open door. It will be like a duplicity of effort, that something has already been put in place and a member comes to ask government to do what has already or is already been worked on. That is some of the nature of the likes of that motion, not that we as government were refusing to do that, because we actually said that this is already done. The government itself came up with the open access policy, and it is government which came out to ask the private sector to begin production of electricity. So if government already pronounced itself, how can someone come and say we are urging government to compel mines? I think I needed to make that clarification.
You earlier mentioned that one of the ways that government has adopted to ensure that businesses are afloat, especially small businesses are afloat amidst this crisis we're in as a country, is by supplying gensets across markets. I would like to find out how many gensets you've bought, Minister, because we've got hundreds of markets in this country.
Yes, there are hundreds and hundreds of markets, but you see that in this crisis situation, government has to respond to the requirements in a phased approach, matching the resource envelope. As you know that once the president on 29th February 2024 declared a national disaster and emergency situation, the government had announced, I think initially, something like 890 million US dollars requirement to respond to the disaster. But after a diligent assessment, government upgraded the resource requirement in terms of funding to about 1.6 billion United States dollars. Now, our cooperating partners, the international community, have been responding. Now, we find ourselves in a space where the international community is not just responding to us as Zambia, they are responding to the SADC region because we've been hard hit as a region. So there is this issue where now the resources we are receiving are trickling in bits and pieces. And as and when you have resources, you look at what can you do at a particular time. And I think in the first phase of genset for markets purchase, I think that the first set were 9 of them, and the targeted markets were distributed to those.
Out of how many gensets that you had planned to purchase?
Well, I think that initially the 23 gensets were earmarked to be purchased, but I'm confident that 9 had arrived and already being distributed. I need to now check the latest, because that is a program that government is rolling out to ensure that we have wider, coverage in terms of the nation, given that the climate change situation appears to be with us going forward.
Make me understand, Minister. And so for the whole country, you planned to purchase 23 gensets as government?
I have said that in terms of phase 1, 23 gensets were budgeted for to be purchased, but 9 had already arrived and distributed. And remember that when government puts up a target, that is a target that government puts in anticipation of resources trickling into this basket where well-wishers are putting in to respond to the drought.
Those rumors that you're abandoning this genset project because it's becoming expensive, how true is that?
Well, I don't have information before my desk right now, and I have not been to any cabinet meeting present myself where such a decision was made, because in a drought situation, you have limited options to choose from, and you have to do what has to be done to save the situation. And so purchase of gensets is one of them. Just like in terms of maize situation, the maize that is being contracted to be produced by contract farming will relatively be more expensive than the ordinary maize from our small-scale farmers. But what can we do? We have to respond to the situation, because we are in a situation of life and death.
Also, help me understand, Minister, now that you've only bought 9 gensets as government that must be distributed across the country. I don't know how that was done. How then has this 9 gensets helped small businesses, to be afloat, really, Minister?
Well, I think that an assessment has to be done, really, by yourselves in the media to find out what is happening. And I also think that from the end of my desk, I should be able to get a fresh and latest assessment of the impact of these gensets. But the most important thing to note here is that as and when we receive units, you have to identify which markets to target. The nation is big. We cannot at once be able to give national coverage, but you have to prioritize and identify certain of those markets that you believe that if they are attended to, you are going to show that you have an intention to respond in a more meaningful way to the entire national demand. But it is our anticipation, really, that with the projected rain pattern, which is unpredictable, but is said to be for most of the country that it will be normal to beyond normal. We are praying for beyond normal rains, because we know that even if we have flash, floods, floods are better off than a drought, because even if crops may be destroyed, you still harvest enough for survival, but more importantly, you are going to have enough electricity to be engaged in the economic activity elsewhere.
Honourable Minister, out of the over $1 billion that you're projected to raise to really fight climate change in the season that we're in, How much of that was raised by government?
Well, I think that those are statistics which I don't have on my fingertips right now, that the Ministry of Finance should be the right people to give those statistics, but I should be able to get those facts right for you.
The Ministry of Green Economy and Environment did project that the country was going to receive above normal rainfall for this particular rain season. We've seen some dry spells across the country. What's happening, Minister?
Well, weather and climate patterns have to be predicted within the capacities of the technology we have. And I can tell you that in the region, Zambia has some of the best technologies in terms of weather prediction. And we are not just relying on our own weather predictions, we are relying on global meteorological information to inform our position. So that is really what is happening in this country. So we as government have not departed from earlier on projections by the Ministry of Green Economy that we are going to have normal to beyond normal rains in most parts of the country. And we do expect that after this 12th of December, going into January 2024, we will have rain in many parts of the country. And of course, February is an anticipated dry spell, but after that, we again expect rain going into March. So we keep our fingers crossed. We haven't abandoned earlier on projections, but we are just being cautious and proactive, given that when you're talking about weather and climate, this borders on nature, and sometimes nature has a tendency to bring out an outlook that was not, forecast before. Just like you saw, even to do with these cyclones that had affected America last month and the month before. You find that it was anticipated to be at a certain level of severity. Then as it hits landfall, you are told that it has downgraded, its impact will be less than what was initially thought, or it will be more than what was initially projected.
Minister,
so that is the situation.
What are your technocrats telling you about the weather pattern? Because even the last season, Minister, you told us that, yes, the technocrats told us that we're going to have a drought, but we didn't foresee to what extent this drought was going to affect the country. Give a clear picture to the nation tonight, Minister, what the technocrats are telling you about the season.
Well, the technocrats right now are telling us that we anticipate that as we go deep into the month of, towards the end of December, to resume normal rain patterns, that the entire January will have normal rains. And we do expect a dry spell in the month of February, after which the rains will resume as initially anticipated. That is the information we are relying on. We are not departing on that information. And this far, they have been fairly accurate on what they had told the nation. They had told us that the rains will come somewhere in mid-November. And for sure, the rains came in mid-November. Most parts of the country actually did receive rains in November, and they have planted in that November, which is a rain that has come earlier than it was last year. So we are hoping for the best. How I wish this was something determinable by ourselves, but nature has its own way of playing out. But we still remain confident that the information coming from our weather experts will be closer to what nature will end up playing out to be.
It's good you use those terms, that it will see how nature will play out to be. In an event, Minister, that we have another drought, do you as government have a plan that we don't go hungry as a country?
Well, yes. The government right now, in terms of maize stocks in the country, is sitting at about 750,000 metric tons, which is sufficient to take us for another 6 months. But before the end of that 6 months, the government has contracted through FRA for contract farming for the production of maize to the tune of 145,000 metric tons early maize. Now, government has also decided from its sitting of cabinet of 13th December, Wednesday, 2024, that rather than contracting just for early maize production, government will now be contracting commercial farmers to produce maize throughout the year. Because early maize is about them now already having planted and they have been watering that maize so that as the rain season kicks in, then the rain-fed dependency takes over that maize and then it is ready by about March. But now the thinking is that let this irrigation become a norm rather than an exception. That throughout the year, once these commercial farmers harvest, immediately after the harvest, they plant regardless the month of the year, that every month will be a planting month, every month will be a harvest month going forward, given the unpredictability and imminency of the climate change challenges that the country and probably the region is faced with. So we are saying irrigated maize production should now be a norm. And if we are going to have, like we are expecting this year, normal rains for normal agricultural practice to produce maize, that is good for country. Remember, President HH has set a target that the country should produce 10 million metric tons of maize, so that at those levels we will have sufficient surplus to export into the region and turn around our economic opportunity into a viable, activity, economic activity, generating a genuine income for our, farmers. The majority of whom take agriculture as the only means of economic activity and livelihood.
You mentioned, Minister, that at the moment we are 6 months food secure. I'd like to find out how much maize stock we have.
Yeah, the maize stock we have right now is, like I've indicated, 750,000 metric tons, with the FRA, as we speak today, sitting on 363,000 metric tons, and the balance in the hands of the private sector. And we think that this is enough to take us for the next 6 months. And before then, there will be another 145 early maize. Now, if we talk about 6 months, it means that even the rain-fed maize production from our small-scale farmers will also have been, harvested, but we have not yet factored that into play because we're waiting for the rainy season, but we're just being proactive to ensure that we are food secure as a country.
Do we expect a sharp increase in the price of maize meal?
Well, it is not our anticipation at the present moment, and I speak with confidence, and also that I just came out of a tour of some parts of the country, northwestern. Recently I was in southern province. I can report that the farmers this year have actually planted almost double what they had done last year, despite having suffered the drought, because farmers are believers. They believe that God will answer them. They believe in the patterns of weather in the past, that a drought does not strike a country like ours twice consecutively, that a drought will strike maybe once in 3 years or 5 years or 10 years. It is cyclic. It is anticipated. So with that in mind, our farmers have gone out, planted big time. In many parts of the country, many times you go to seed outlets, you find that there is no seed. And now there is a question of fertilizer. But fertilizer, I think that there are sufficient stocks out there. And I also would like to indicate here that the government has paid off almost all the farmers who supplied maize to FRA, so that they have their cash and be able to buy fertilizer, because we know that most of our farmers actually do not just depend on the fish pack. It is too small to produce enough maize for home consumption and surplus for them to sell to FRA or for economic activity. So all the farmers have, almost all of them have been paid, and this is in keeping with the promise of President HH that under his administration, farmers will have to be paid so that in time, so that they are able to enterprise more, and like what you used to see before, where sometimes farmers will be paid the money by FRA somewhere in February. I think that this is work in progress.
Allow me to touch on this one last aspect, Minister. Obviously, the 10th of December was quite historic for us, the media, and this has happened when you are Minister of Information and Media, where the media was allowed for the first time to broadcast, live court proceedings that started with the eligibility of President Edgar Lungu. Do we see this continuing, or perhaps this case that happened on the 10th was just a special one that you wanted the nation to see?
Well, from the wording of the letter from the judiciary, I think from the Chief Justice, there was a note or an indication in that letter to say, in keeping with the open access to justice program, the Chief Justice has allowed the media to be in attendance. And as a ministry, we are grateful to the Chief Justice, and the judiciary as a whole, for allowing both public and private media to have access to the courtroom and transmit live those transactions. It has really helped the nation, because all the citizens followed for themselves what the court were saying, and that is why you have seen that there is no dissent, so to speak, out there in terms of the judgment that was delivered. The citizens understood where the judges were standing on in terms of the law, and I think that it was also rendered in a very sober, clear, and easy to understand manner, that even when you are not a lawyer, you understood what the court, were saying. That is very, very important. The only dissent, of course, you hear is from those who feel that, well, now that this is a judgment, what's left for us? And purely driven by political interests and not justice interests. So that was very important, and it has set a very, very good precedence in terms of information dissemination and the elimination of misinformation and disinformation by social media. Begin to imagine that that judgment was passed in camera, meaning the media were also just waiting to hear and report upon it. Just how much social media misinformation would have been channeled out there by some of the professors of social media propagandist machinery out there. The nation would right now have been searching for, is this true? What is the truth from the untruth? Because social media would have been awash with a lot of misinformation. The court has passed this judgment because of this and that. Now everyone is clear, and everybody...
Was that the intention of the executive arm of government? Because some that critique you, Honorable Minister, say that this was a calculated move. If the judgment went otherwise, government would not have dared to broadcast this live.
Well, I have thanked the Chief Justice, because I am from the executive arm of government, and we had no role in inviting the media. That was purely the judiciary And like I indicated, it was in line with the Open Access to Justice program being sponsored by the European Union to ensure transparency in the transactions of government programs. So it is my anticipation as a media minister that going forward, it is a good practice that the media are allowed, particularly on these important judgments that have national consequence connotations, that the media be allowed so that the citizens can only get facts and inform their choices and understanding of what their government is doing. And government is not the executive, it's the legislature, is the judiciary, is the executive. Just like we have seen the transparency with which Parliament transacts its business. Parliament makes laws that the judiciary interprets. Parliament is live on radio, Parliament is live on TV, and when each clause is being promulgated, everyone is watching, they are able to see which MP is against this or supporting this, and we are held accountable.
The allegations that there's a strong political influence and hand over this particular judgment, and President Hakainde Hichilema has been mentioned as one that has influenced the judgment to go this way. As Chief Government Spokesperson, what's your reaction to this?
Well, first of all, I would like to disassociate and distance His Excellency President Hakainde Hichilema from any assertions of involvement by him, State House, or any government functionary that is not part of the judiciary in coming up with this judgment. That's number one. Number two, I have never known President HH to be a lawyer. To be able to have that legal acumen that he would guide the judges to pronounce themselves on the principles of law as they did, a judgment which I think has gone down the annals of history with integrity, because the entire legal profession agrees with that judgment. Even lawyers lawyers for the respondents, they do agree. Only those who argue, they will be arguing on other points. The arguments, if you have heard, they are not saying they don't agree with the judgment. They are just saying, no, this matter was already determined. How did the court revisit? But even with that argument, they know that the court has authority to revisit its own judgment if it was meant per incuriam, meaning it was made outside the law, or the court has an opportunity to expand the jurisprudence of the law in the land, or it is in the interest of furthering, justice. So under those three circumstances, the court does revisit its own judgment. And in the case of the Constitutional Court, who else can revisit the Constitutional Court's judgment, given that they have original and final jurisdiction? And I have heard some people say, no, the Constitutional Court has final jurisdiction. So they already pronounce themselves with finality. How come they are revisiting their own judgment? By final jurisdiction is not meant that once they pronounce themselves, they can't revisit that judgment. No. By final jurisdiction is meant that there is no appellate platform, meaning this matter cannot be taken to another higher court to be adjudicated or reviewed. This is not a victory for the applicant or for those who may have wished that President Lungu does not contest either on political grounds or on the legal grounds that he did not qualify, but that this has brought certainty to the law, and that going forward, all those charged with responsibility of being in public office should know that the law is the backbone of governance, and that even when you have individuals in the judiciary who may be compromised towards a particular political persuasion or affiliation, they should not cross the red line as they by themselves to begin to manipulate the law, because the law is the anchor for the stability of a nation and the nation building going forward. So we're proud of our judiciary for that judgment.
Finally, Minister, President Edgar Lungu has accepted the verdict of the court, but also has also mentioned that he's set in motion is Plan B. Is government shaken by the Plan B of the former head of state?
Well, first of all, we acknowledge that he has accepted, which is in keeping with the rule of law and respect, particularly for the law. As for the question of Plan B, we are still at sea, all of us as citizens, what is contained in Plan B. And so it will be premature for us as government to pronounce ourselves as to how we stand in relation to Plan B, which is, as of now, unknown to ourselves, until we unearth what is connected to Plan B. But our urge is that such Plan B should be within the law and should be within democratic considerations, and that anything beyond that has no space and place in Zambia. We want to maintain the unity and peace of our country, and we want the ascendancy to leadership by our citizens into leadership to be only through one means: the ballot, democratically conducted, so that citizens can speak and that the ballot is their voice, and that their voice, and that their vote is their voice, and their voice is heard as to how they want to be governed. That is the mandate that this government has, to ensure that that system continues to be protected, and within that system, whatever Plan B is welcome.
Honorable Minister, thank you so much for making time to speak with us.
Thank you for having me, and I wish all our viewers on Diamond TV a happy, a Merry Christmas, and a happy, prosperous, and peaceful, productive and progressive 2025.
Thank you again.